Have made quite a discovery, the wreck of a German U-boat. A team of divers spent decades searching for it and using sonar finally found the
A submarine resting quietly beneath 230 feet of Atlantic darkness, its existence defying every official record for over 50 years. What would you think if an entire crew disappeared, and the true story behind their fate remained hidden until discovery brought answers far darker than anyone expected? This is more than a tale of sunken steel and silence. It is the haunting account of lives trapped underwater, a wreck that rewrote history and claimed more lives decades after the war had ended. The impossible submarine. In 1991, a seemingly routine dive off the coast of New Jersey uncovered something the world wasn't ready for. A German submarine resting quietly 230 feet below the Atlantic surface. What made this discovery so extraordinary was not just the submarine itself, but the fact that it should not have been there at all. Official records from Germany, Britain, and the United States all agreed that every German submarine lost during World War II had been accounted for, with precise locations and circumstances documented. Yet here lay a pristine wreck in American waters, contradicting decades of carefully maintained naval history. Divers first encountered the massive steel hull in murky and challenging conditions. The submarine sat upright on the sandy ocean floor, hatches closed, as if it had been placed there gently rather than damaged in battle. This absence of typical wreckage signs added another layer of mystery. No debris field, no scattered wreckage, just a silent sentinel beneath the waves. Initial excitement quickly turned to confusion. Such a discovery should have made headlines immediately, but this submarine simply did not exist in the official archives. The mystery deepened as divers and researchers began piecing together evidence. Attempts to identify the submarine involved painstaking analysis of its design. Specialists recognized the distinctive conning tower and hull as unmistakably German, specifically a type known as a U-boat. Despite this clear physical proof, no contemporary records matched the submarine's location or circumstances of loss. This contradiction set the stage for years of investigation, with the submarine existing in a place nowhere official history placed it. Attempts to verify the find were met with disbelief and skepticism from official channels. The Naval Historical Center listened politely but dismissed claims, citing meticulous records that left no gaps. However, the divers' experience, touching the steel hull, swimming within the vessel's intact interiors, provided undeniable proof. Either the records had an error that had lasted half a century, or the divers had stumbled onto a secret the world was not supposed to uncover. A key part of the intrigue lay in the fact that the wreck was relatively intact, with no signs of the intensive damage typically seen on combat losses. This suggested a different, more puzzling fate. If the submarine wasn't sunk by enemy forces, then what had sealed its crew's fate? This unanswered question created a persistent fascination for those who dared to explore the depths, keeping the mystery alive for years. The location itself was perilous for exploration. 230 feet below the surface is beyond recreational diving limits and demands expert skill and equipment. The habitat was unforgiving, with cold water temperatures near freezing and currents strong enough to disorient even the most experienced divers. Visibility was poor, and the confined, treacherous interior of a submarine, combined with deteriorating wreckage, elevated the risks multiple times over. Still, the lure of the unknown fueled repeated dives and investigations. Initial dives revealed fragments of human remains scattered amid the submarine's control room, a grim reminder that lives had been lost in silence. Personal items and equipment lay coated in decades of silt, yet no clear identification tags were discovered at first. German submarines typically carried manufacturer plates and stamped designations throughout their interiors, but this wreck lacked all obvious markings. The intentional removal of identifying plaques suggested someone had tried to erase the submarine's identity or conceal its true history. There was a past to this submarine, one that explained its final patrol and the lives on board, which helps us understand why this wreck was so significant. Searching for answers. From the moment the submarine was found, a small but dedicated team of divers threw themselves into uncovering its identity. Their first challenge was to map the wreck and gather every possible clue from inside and out. John Chatterton, a world-renowned technical diver, led the efforts with relentless determination. The team moved cautiously, aware that every dive could be their last due to the depth, darkness, and complexity of the site. The early investigations were complicated by a lack of documentation or official acknowledgement. Although German naval records were generally precise, this submarine seemed absent from all lists of losses near the American coast. Attempts to cross-reference wartime logs with physical evidence repeatedly hit dead ends. Without a name or number, the submarine remained an unsolved riddle. Researchers sifted through archives, attack reports, and radio intercepts, but nothing matched the wreck's location. Offered explanations ranged from conspiracy theories about Nazi officers fleeing to South America to misidentified wrecks. Some speculated the discovery was a mistaken identity or fabrication. However, Chatterton's first-hand explorations confirmed the hull's features had unmistakable German design, and the condition of the wreck suggested a surprisingly recent and uncommonly intact sinking. The growing evidence forced experts to confront the unlikely reality that official histories might be incomplete or inaccurate. The divers conducted multiple underwater explorations for 6 years, which started after they found the site. The cold, visibility-lacking waters prevented most people from entering the dive site, but the investigators used it as their main investigation area. The team discovered more information through each expedition, which revealed structural layouts and damage patterns and personal items that provided evidence about the submarine's history. The team discovered human remains, which made their mission more difficult and urgent because of the increased emotional impact. The process of reaching naval historians and official institutions proved to be unsuccessful. Officials showed two different reactions because some officials rejected updates to records that had existed for decades, while others showed hesitation towards new evidence which came from the divers' testimonies. Chatterton and his team continued their work because they obtained new physical evidence that disputed accepted beliefs of the time. They developed a comprehensive understanding of the actual events that occurred to the submarine and its entire crew. Mystery deepened through a tragic event. Two divers who died after a dive in 1992 explored the wreck, but their names remain unknown. The diving community experienced shock after they died because their deaths raised concerns about discovering unfamiliar things. Some people preferred to find answers instead of avoiding dangers, which created a historical mystery and a sacred site to honor those who died many years ago. Understanding the submarine's origin and crew helps explain how and why it ended up in these waters, far from its intended patrol area. The submarine and its crew. The submarine in question was U-869, a Type 9C/40 German long-range attack submarine designed to cross vast oceans and disrupt Allied shipping lanes. Built in Bremen's Deskamag shipyard, U-869 was commissioned in November 1944 during the desperate final phases of World War II. Its commander, Helmuth Neuerberg, was a 29-year-old officer, young but not unusual given the high attrition rates among experienced submarine commanders during the war. U-869's crew numbered 56 men, a mix of hardened veterans and young sailors barely out of their teens. Most were trained rigorously in the Baltic Sea, where conditions were harsh but needed to prepare them for deadly Atlantic patrols. These men understood the stakes. Submarine duty had become a near-certain death sentence by late 1944. Every role on board was vital. Success and survival depended on flawless teamwork and discipline in cramped, unforgiving quarters. Initially, German U-boats dominated the Atlantic, sinking millions of tons of Allied shipping with deadly efficiency. These submarines were the terror of the seas, using stealth and deadly wolf pack tactics to devastating effect. However, by mid-war, Allied forces had adapted. Radar, sonar, improved convoy tactics, and code-breaking all combined to turn the tide. Submarines like U-869 were no longer hunters, but hunted. By the time U-869 was deployed, the odds were grim. Of approximately 40,000 men who served in the German submarine force during the war, roughly 30,000 would die, a staggering 75% casualty rate unmatched by any other military branch. U-869's sailors knew these statistics well. They had seen comrades vanish beneath the waves, yet they still took to sea on their first and only patrol. In December 1944, U-869 left its base in Kristiansand, Norway, with orders to cross the Atlantic and patrol the shipping lanes off the eastern United States, especially near New York and New Jersey. Its mission was clear: to sink any Allied vessels encountered and return safely if possible. 56 men sealed themselves inside a steel cylinder, pushing into hostile waters, embarking on a mission from which none would return. Throughout the war, every loss was meticulously recorded by German and Allied authorities. U-869 was officially declared lost after reports of an Allied attack near Gibraltar in February 1945. Based on intercepted radio silence and attack logs, it was presumed sunk off the African coast. Family members mourned far from the true resting place, and memorials listed the wreck at a distant location thousands of miles away. The mystery surrounding the submarine's destruction holds answers more disturbing than conventional warfare damage, drawing the investigation into even darker waters. Official records versus reality. For decades, the fate of U-869 was settled in naval history books. Official wartime records placed its destruction off the coast of Gibraltar near Morocco in February 1945, a distance of over 5,000 miles from the wreck found off New Jersey. Allied forces had reported attacking a submarine in that area on the documented date, and analysts matched this claim to U-869, which had stopped radio communications around the same time. German naval archives accepted that U-869 had been sunk there by Allied depth charges, closing the case with apparent finality. Families of the crew were notified their loved ones had perished thousands of miles from American shores, and memorials honored them accordingly. The story fit well within the broader narratives of the war's final months. U-boats were being relentlessly hunted, defeated far from home waters. No one questioned the records for nearly half a century. Yet, the wreck found off the New Jersey coast challenged the very foundation of this accepted truth. When divers first brought up photographs and artifacts from the distant wreck site, historians faced conflicting evidence. The submarine's identification plates were missing, anomaly enough, but its physical location was impossible according to every official document. The wreck was too far north and west of the recorded loss. There were no Allied reports of attacking or even detecting a submarine off the American eastern seaboard during that period, and no known destroyer or patrol aircraft recorded an engagement in that region. The discrepancies between two pieces of evidence created problems for assessing which sources contained trustworthy wartime documents. Military units maintain their records with high accuracy, but complete accuracy remains impossible during the unpredictable nature of combat. Official reports, which establish facts through documented assumptions, become unchangeable after they receive official status. The U-869 case forced naval historians to confront the possibility that their meticulous accounts might have overlooked critical details or misinterpreted information. The patterns of damage discovered on the submarine's hull created additional difficulties that needed to be solved. The official story assumed destruction from depth charges, but the physical evidence did not align with such attacks. Depth charges typically cause widespread hull deformation and crushing, leaving rippling dents and bent steel. The damage occurred through a specific impact point, which resulted in a large hole that ripped through the surface instead of an external force creating a crushing effect. Experts began to suspect the sinking was not caused by the enemy, but by something else entirely, a malfunction or accident. The discrepancy between what people recorded and what actually existed under the ocean created a more complex mystery about how the submarine met its end. The investigation led to a new analysis of Allied patrol logs and combat reports, along with German operational orders, which would assist in finding clues that had previously gone unnoticed. Historians also studied submarine movements in combat zones from past wars. They aimed to determine whether U-869 had followed its designated route or had been compelled to navigate through unplanned areas. The evidence showed that U-869 had actually operated off the American coast instead of its previous belief about being near Gibraltar. This discovery created a new understanding about U-boat movements during the final stages of World War II. The true cause of the submarine's destruction, something far removed from enemy action, would soon reveal itself in the twisted metal and haunting silence of the sunken vessel. The fatal attack. Examining the damage on U-869 reveals a grim and startling story, far different from a conventional wartime sinking. The submarine's control room.
So the front half of the submarine consisted of the control room, which is that destroyed, damaged area, the epicenter of an explosion, and then in front of that would have been the forward torpedo room, which most of the enlisted men would live in.
The heart of its operations was destroyed by a massive, focused hole torn inward, the steel peeled back by a forceful and sudden impact. This type of damage defied the signature patterns of depth charges, which generally crush and buckle hulls from outside pressure rather than puncture them with surgical precision. The localized nature of the blast indicated a torpedo explosion from within close proximity rather than a distant assault. This realization opened a disturbing line of inquiry. If not enemy forces, then what weapon struck U-869? Allied forces had no recorded torpedo attacks in the area during the time frame U-869 was in those waters. No surface ships or aircraft had logged engagements against submarines off the New Jersey coast. The mystery of what caused such catastrophic damage with no enemy involvement deepened. Insight came from understanding the technology German submarines employed late in the war. By late 1944, many German torpedoes were equipped with advanced acoustic homing systems designed to track the loudest engine noises of enemy vessels.
Airdropped acoustic homing torpedo, codenamed Fido. It is passive acoustic since its sensors listen for U-boat sounds only, homing as it will track and target the U-boat.
Though innovative, these acoustic seekers were not foolproof. Occasionally, the homing mechanisms failed, locking onto incorrect targets, or, in the worst-case scenario, their own submarine. The evidence suggested U-869 had fired a torpedo moments before its demise. The positioning of torpedo tubes, the state of the weapons room, and fragment patterns indicated an active attack underway. Most chillingly, it appeared the torpedo had turned back on its launcher, the very submarine that fired it, homing on its own diesel engine sounds in the confined, noisy underwater environment. That fateful malfunction would have given no warning to the crew. Acoustic torpedoes move silently, and there would have been no detectable approach or chance to execute evasive maneuvers. One moment, the men were waiting for confirmation of a sleigh. The next, their own weapon detonated inside the control room, flooding the compartment instantly and slaying everyone inside within seconds. Despite the explosion, not all crew members perished immediately. U-869's design divided it into multiple watertight compartments, separated by heavy steel doors. Some sailors were in aft sections or engine rooms, sealed off from the blast's direct force. These men survived the initial catastrophe, only to face a slow and agonizing death as the submarine sank and the flooding crept through the damaged bow sections. Trapped inside a steel tomb 230 feet underwater, they could neither escape nor survive the pressure. Even if hatches could be opened, the depth's extreme pressure would have been fatal without proper decompression. The crew in these compartments endured darkness, mounting fear, and eventual suffocation, knowing their fate as the submarine settled on the seabed. This horrific scenario revealed a tragic irony. The submarine was not destroyed by enemy attack, but by its own malfunctioning weapon system. It was a death by friendly fire on a scale rarely imagined, with a crew lost to an invisible enemy within. The discovery profoundly altered how historians understood the risks and perils faced by submariners beyond enemy fire. The silent wreck resting off the New Jersey coast now told a harrowing tale of technological failure, courage, and despair, one that challenged decades of wartime assumptions and memorialized a crew caught in a deadly twist of fate. This chilling revelation turned the investigation toward the human cost, as those trapped beneath the waves became not just statistics, but individuals whose final moments were marked by confusion and dread. trapped and waiting in the dark. The horror beneath the waves did not end with the initial explosion. While the torpedo blast devastated the submarine's control room, the 1,000-ton vessel was divided into multiple watertight compartments, sealed by heavy steel doors. Some crew members were stationed in these aft compartments, shielded from the immediate blast, but now imprisoned within a slowly sinking steel coffin. Locked in darkness and silence, they faced an unimaginable fate, trapped underwater, with no hope of escape. These after compartments remained intact, but the flooding that began in the bow slowly spread through damaged bulkheads, filling the forward sections with water. The men sealed behind the doors would have felt the violent shock of the explosion, heard the roar of rushing water, and experienced the submarine's tilt as it lost buoyancy. There was no chance for outside assistance or communication. The only certainty was the descent into the cold, crushing depths beneath them. At 230 feet below the surface, conditions become quickly deadly without specialized equipment. Even if the men had opened a hatch or attempted to escape, the water pressure at that depth would have been instantly fatal. The immense pressure difference between the sealed compartments and the ocean outside meant they were sealed inside a steel tomb, suffocating slowly as air was consumed and oxygen levels dropped. The darkness would have been absolute once emergency lighting and power failed. Flickering lanterns, if any remained operational, provided fleeting illumination amid the gathering silence. The crew likely gathered in small groups, knowing or sensing the inevitability of their fate. Each minute that passed brought them closer to the end, a slow and agonizing death in total isolation, with the weight of hundreds of feet of water pressing in on all sides. Recovery of human remains revealed evidence of this grim reality. Bones scattered throughout the aft sections showed no signs of violent trauma, in stark contrast to the blast damage seen in the control room. This suggested that many of those sealed inside had survived the initial explosion, yet ultimately perished waiting. The scene inside the submarine became a haunting tableau of desperation, fear, and helplessness, frozen in time. The first part of the men's tragedy involved an unexpected explosion, but the second part showed how they faced cruel imprisonment. The victims remained motionless because they knew their destiny, and they experienced a gradual process of choking to death. The investigation of turned the wreck into a war grave, which preserves its historical significance. The men inside became more than battle casualties because they became victims of an accident that occurred when they became trapped on a sinking ship. Their Atlantic Ocean presence throughout the war transformed into a strong representation of military sacrifice and the unpredictable nature of naval warfare. The divers who investigated the wrecking site found themselves facing dangers that matched the challenges encountered by the missing crew members. The team needed to demonstrate exceptional abilities because they had to operate in a space that contained dangerous conditions and unpredictable movements. The physical dangers of the situation created boundaries that restricted the emotional process of discovering a devastating tragedy. The present-day situation proves that researchers require more than past knowledge to understand contemporary realities. The submarine's inner areas kept taking lives until after the combat had finished. The perilous nature of peering into this watery grave soon exacted a devastating toll on the divers drawn into its mystery. The cost of discovery. Exploring a wreck like U-869 is not for the faint of heart. At 230 feet, divers confront a host of hazards: near-freezing water temperatures, vicious currents, and crushing pressure.
60 miles off the New Jersey coast and 230 feet of black water, there's a German U-boat that, according to every official record, every government archive, every naval historian on the planet, shouldn't exist.
Nitrogen narcosis, the underwater equivalent of intoxication, clouds judgment and distorts time. Every dive requires meticulous planning, steady nerves, and precise execution. The wreck's interior adds further challenges: sharp metal edges, collapsing bulkheads, and silt that, when disturbed, reduces visibility to zero. Despite these dangers, the team dedicated to uncovering U-869's secrets returned repeatedly to the site. Their persistence was fueled by an obsession with truth and the memory of the lost crew. Yet the wreck would not yield its secrets without exacting a toll. Between 1991 and 1997, 3 divers lost their lives exploring the submarine. Chris Rouse and his son Chrissy both perished after a dive in 1992, their deaths a grim echo of the tragedy they sought to understand. These losses shocked the diving community and raised difficult ethical questions. Was the pursuit of knowledge worth risking human life? Some argued the wreck should be left alone, a sealed grave respected from a distance. Others believed that uncovering the truth was a tribute to the dead, a chance to bring closure to families and rewrite history accurately. There was no easy answer, and the debate underscored the thin line between exploration and obsession. The investigation led to increased dedication from those who continued their research because they found the deaths to be more compelling than before. The divers who lost their lives during the operation had chosen to face danger because they believed it their duty to protect the crew members who remained trapped underwater. The search for U-869's fate was now more urgent because of the dedication shown by the crew members who lost their lives. As the dives continued to uncover human remains and historical objects, and the submarine compartments showed their distressing condition, the emotional weight became increasingly unbearable. Each discovery proved that these items, which dated back to history, were actually components of lives that had been lost. The divers explored the wreckage, but they actually observed a moment when humans experienced both suffering and courage. The recovery of artifacts, such as a torpedo man's knife, enabled scientists to identify the submarine together with its crew, which resulted in both relief and heartbreak. Families who had believed their loved ones lost off Africa learned the truth, that their sons died much closer to American shores, under haunting circumstances. The new information brought closure, but it reopened psychological wounds that people had believed to be completely healed. The U-869 incident demonstrates how human curiosity can create dangerous situations when people try to remember and respect things. The divers placed their lives at risk to discover a hidden truth, which they did through secret activities that honored the lost soldiers while proving established historical facts to be wrong. The submarine and the living people who interact with its presence exist as one unified entity which connects all who have died to their shadowy existence. The total cost to discover new information included not only the deaths of people, but also the heavy obligation to remember a disaster that time had nearly erased from public memory. The legacy of U-869 extends beyond the depths to the very nature of truth, memory, and sacrifice. Legacy and lessons. The discovery and identification of U-869 forced historians to confront how incomplete and sometimes incorrect even the most official wartime records can be. For half a century, navies on both sides of the conflict believed the submarine had been sunk near Gibraltar, a location accepted without serious question. Yet here, lying undisturbed off the coast of New Jersey, was proof that history had gotten it wrong. This revelation shook the foundations of naval history, showing that certainty in wartime loss records is often an illusion. The mislocation of the wreck meant families of the crew lived decades with false knowledge of where their loved ones rested. Some made pilgrimages to the African coast, standing on beaches that bore no connection to their son's final resting place. Learning of the truth brought complex emotions, gratitude for clarity, but grief reawakened by the undeniable reality of how their relatives died. The personal impact of this discovery reminded everyone involved that history is not just about facts, but about real lives and enduring memories. For the broader military and historical community, U-869 became a cautionary tale about assuming archival infallibility. Wartime conditions are chaotic, intelligence is imperfect, and errors can endure for generations. This case exposed how assumptions easily calcify into accepted facts, and how only persistent, sometimes risky investigation can unearth a more accurate version of events. It underscored the need for continuous questioning and re-examination of even the most settled history. The story also highlights the advancements and hazards of submarine warfare technology. Acoustic homing torpedoes, while revolutionary, brought unexpected dangers, from malfunctioning weapons turning on their own vessels to crews trapped by their very defenses. U-869's fate stands as a sobering reminder that innovation often carries unintended consequences, especially amid the fog of war. Culturally and ethically, the wreck prompted a debate about exploration versus preservation. U-869 is not formally protected as a war grave by American law, unlike many European military wrecks. While some in the diving community argue it should remain undisturbed out of respect and safety concerns, others support continued exploration for the sake of truth and remembrance. This tension reflects broader questions about how societies honor those lost at sea and balance curiosity with reverence. The wreckage site shows active physical degradation. The hull will completely collapse because saltwater corrosion will persistently attack the ship over an extended time period. The remaining artifacts and clues will vanish permanently when that event occurs. The annual closure of U-869 Learning Opportunities shows how underwater history needs protection because it holds essential historical value. The identification of U-869 also brings to light the haunting reality of loss on both sides in war. 56 young men from Germany rest beneath the waves, many teenagers never having seen combat before their final patrol. The divers who died for their mission drive the story forward because their deaths show how war affects people across different time periods. The story shows how human determination can achieve successful results even when tragedy strikes. The divers who searched tirelessly to uncover U-869's truth were driven by a mix of curiosity, respect, and the desire to bring closure to families. The research efforts and underwater technology improvements, combined with their sacrifices to reveal a hidden story that time and sea would have erased U-869's tale, stands as a reminder that history is not static. The process of historical writing evolves through our ongoing discovery of new information, which enables us to recognize lost historical figures while dealing with historical events that make us uncomfortable. U-869's discovery rewrote history, revealing a tragic fate hidden for decades beneath the Atlantic waves. This story reminds us that even official records can be wrong, and that uncovering truth often comes with a cost. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please like and subscribe for more real-life mysteries and history uncovered. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.